2 men dead. 1 stabbed with his own dagger behind a locked gate. The second hurled down stone stairs, skull shattered, the same blade in his hand. Both keys inside, both impossible. Until a gentle English spinster with knitting needles and a mind like a steel trap descends into the glittering catacombs and proves that murder, like salt, preserves its secrets until someone dares to taste the truth. Chapter 1. The Invitation from the East. Jane Marple sat alone in the small morning room of Danemead House, a pleasant red brick villa on the outskirts of Broadgate, where the hedges were clipped with military precision, and the village church clock chimed the quarters with dependable solemnity. She had come down from London a fortnight earlier at the urgent invitation of her nephew Raymond, who declared that his aunt looked positively peaky after a trying winter of influenza among the choir and a distressing affair of poisoned marmalade at the Women's Institute. Joan, Raymond's wife, had added her gentle persuasions, and Miss Marple, who disliked fuss, had allowed herself to be installed in the chintz-hung guest room with a view of the chrysanthemums. It was a raw October morning. The fire had been newly laid, and the flames were only just beginning to lick round the coal. A neat stack of correspondence lay on the walnut writing desk, but Miss Marple's attention was fixed upon her knitting. Pale blue wool intended for a matinee jacket for Joan's expected infant. The needles clicked with the quiet rhythm of long practice, and the only other sound was the occasional rustle of the Daily Telegraph, which Raymond had left folded to the crossword. The maid, a fresh-faced girl named Gladys, entered with the second post on a silver salver. "Only one for you, ma'am," she said, bobbing a curtsy that still betrayed her training at the local orphanage. "Foreign, by the look of it." Miss Marple laid down her needles and took the letter. The envelope was of heavy cream-laid paper, the flap secured with crimson sealing wax impressed by a coat of arms she did not immediately recognize, a double-headed eagle surmounted by a mural crown. The address, Miss Jane Marple, Danemead House, Broadgate, England, was written in a hand both decisive and continental. The downstrokes firm, the capitals elaborately curled. There was no stamp. Instead, a railway voucher peeped from beneath the flap. She slit the envelope with the silver paper knife Joan kept for the purpose. 2 sheets unfolded, covered in the same vigorous script. Palak Zborowskich Kanonitsha, 17 Kraków 14. October. My dear Miss Marple, you will not remember me, and I have no right to impose upon a kindness shown 30 years ago to a frightened girl in a London hotel. Yet I must try. I was Helena Dunajska then, 19 years old, travelling with my aunt, and trembling because a pearl necklace, my mother's last gift, had vanished from my dressing case on the boat train. You sat opposite, us at tea in the Great Western Hotel, noticed my tears, and within the hour had recovered the necklace from the lining of my aunt's travelling rug, where it had slipped through a tear. You refused even a cup of coffee in thanks, saying only that little things are all that matter. I have never forgotten. Now I am Countess Zborowska, widowed these 15 years, and the little thing that matters is life itself. My nephew Jan, my late husband's heir, was found dead 3 nights ago in the ancient catacombs beneath our palace, stabbed through the heart with his own dagger. The police speak of suicide. The wound, the locked gate, the key in Jan's pocket all seem to confirm it. But I knew Jan. He was not a boy to take his own life. There is darkness here, Miss Marple, older than the salt workings, older than the palace stones. I enclose a first-class voucher on the Orient Simplon Express as far as Vienna, and thence to Kraków. My motor will meet any train. Come if you can, before another shadow falls." In desperate hope, Helena Zborowska Miss Marple read the letter twice, her mild blue eyes resting thoughtfully on the seal. She remembered the girl now, tall, dark, with a trembling mouth, and a habit of twisting her handkerchief into knots. The necklace had been a modest string of pearls, nothing to excite greed, yet the aunt had been furious, and the girl terrified of disgrace. A small thing, as she had said, but small things were the stuff of life. She rang the bell. Gladys reappeared with gratifying promptness. "Tell Mrs. Raymond I shall need my heavy coat brushed, and ask cook if she can manage a packet of sandwiches for a journey. I am going abroad. Abroad, ma'am." Gladys's eyes widened. "Will it be France? Poland, child. And tell Hawkins to see that my trunk is ready by noon tomorrow. I shall want the brown tweed, the fur-lined boots, and the grey wool dress with the jet buttons." Alone again, Miss Marple folded the letter and slipped it into her handbag. She picked up her knitting, but the needles were still for a long moment. Kraków, city of kings and scholars, of dragon bones under the Wawel, and salt mines deep as cathedrals. She had read of the ancient workings in a guidebook once, borrowed from the travelling library. Men had delved there since the 13th century, and the tunnels ran for miles, glittering with crystal, dangerous with flooded galleries and sudden drops. "Suicide," the police said. Miss Marple's lips pursed. "A young man, heir to a great fortune, chooses a dagger from the ancestral armoury, and a locked vault beneath his own house. Possible, of course. But human beings were rarely so theatrical without reason." She resumed her knitting, counting stitches with care. The matinee jacket would be finished on the train, and little Raymond or Joan would have warm shoulders against the Polish winter. As for the larger matter, well, one step at a time. She had learned long ago that murder, like influenza, began with a single symptom, and symptoms, thank heaven, could be diagnosed. Chapter 2. The City Beneath the City. The Orient Simplon Express deposited Miss Marple at Kraków Główny on a morning when the sky hung low and pewter-coloured, and the Vistula lay like a dull steel ribbon between its banks. A thin mist drifted from the river, softening the outlines of the Baroque facades and muffling the clop of horses' hooves on the wet cobbles. The station clock, ornate as a wedding cake, struck 10 with a note that seemed to linger in the cold air. Countess Zborowska was waiting beneath the glass canopy, taller than memory had painted her, upright in a long sable coat despite her 60-odd years. The dark eyes were the same, but the mouth had settled into lines of habitual authority. She recognized Miss Marple at once, though 30 years had silvered the English woman's fluffy white hair, and added a network of fine wrinkles round the mild blue eyes. "Miss Marple." The Countess's voice was low, musical, with only the faintest trace of accent. "You came, I dared not hope." "Trains are remarkably punctual, Countess," Miss Marple replied, allowing her hand to be taken in a grip both firm and trembling. "And hope, I find, is a commodity one should never underestimate." A sleek black Daimler stood at the curb, its chauffeur stiff in bottle-green livery. He touched his cap, stowed Miss Marple's modest trunk and ancient dressing case as though they were Fabergé, and handed the ladies into the tonneau. The door shut with the decisive clunk of expensive German engineering, and they glided away through streets where the very stones seemed to breathe history. Miss Marple observed everything with the bright, apparently innocent interest of a tourist. The great cloth hall in the Rinneck, its arcades still hung with amber and linen, though the morning was raw. The flower women huddled in shawls, their buckets blazing with chrysanthemums the colour of rust and gold. The students hurrying to lectures with books under their arms and cigarettes dangling from youthful lips. Yet beneath the picturesque surface, her mind was busy cataloguing. The military policeman with the white and red armband, the shuttered kiosk where a news vendor had chalked in bold letters, Tajemnica śmierć w Catacombach, mysterious death in the catacombs. The quick, almost furtive glances cast at the Zborowski crest on the motor-car door. The palace on Canonica Street was a narrow Renaissance facade, wedged between a canon's residence and a Jesuit library. From the outside it appeared modest. Within, a courtyard opened, arcaded and unexpectedly spacious, with a fountain in the form of a bronze dragon spouting into a stone basin. The chauffeur carried the luggage. A footman in black relieved Miss Marple of her umbrella, and the Countess herself led the way up a staircase of worn marble to a suite on the first floor overlooking the courtyard. "Your rooms," the Countess said, throwing open double doors. "They were my husband's when he was a boy. The fire is lit, and Pani Marta will bring hot water. At 1 o'clock we lunch, and I will present everyone. Until then, rest." Miss Marple would have preferred to prowl, but good manners prevailed. She removed her hat, brown felt with a modest velvet bow, smoothed her hair before the gilt mirror, and allowed Pani Marta, a broad, silent woman with a bunch of keys clashing at her waist like a jailer's, to pour steaming water into the porcelain basin. The soap smelled of pine and caraway. When the door closed, Miss Marple opened her dressing case, took out a small leather notebook and a propelling pencil, and wrote in her neat slanting hand. "Arrived 10:17. Countess agitated but controlled. Palace staff numerous, disciplined. Newspaper headline suggests public interest. Note dragon fountain. Local legend." She underlined the last words twice, closed the book, and sat down to a breakfast tray of coffee, rolls still warm from the oven, and pale yellow butter stamped with the Zborowski crest. At 12:30, she changed into her second-best grey wool, pinned a Cairngorm brooch at the throat, and descended. The dining room was long and dimly lit by 3 windows of stained glass, depicting the labours of the salt miners. A table of black oak stretched beneath a chandelier of rock crystal that trembled in the draught. Covers were laid for 8. The Countess stood at the head, a butler behind her chair like a sentinel. "Miss Marple, may I present my household?" Captain Tadeusz Dabrowski clicked his heels. He was perhaps 45, lean as a fencing master, with a scar that ran from left temple to jaw, souvenir, no doubt, of the charge at Kutno in 39. His eyes were the cold grey of a winter sea. "Enchanté," he said, bowing over Miss Marple's hand with military correctness. Dr. Stephan Lies, the family physician, was small, precise, almost bird-like. His gold spectacles flashed as he murmured conventional politeness. Miss Irina Wojcik, Jan's fiancée, was a study in black and white. Black dress, black hair, white face from which violet shadows underlined enormous eyes still swollen with grief. She managed a tremulous smile. Mr. Kazimierz Nowak, the lawyer, was plump, urbane, smelling faintly of Turkish cigarettes and expensive cologne. He pressed Miss Marple's fingers with moist warmth and launched into a compliment upon English roses in October. Last came Mr. Felix Green, the English art dealer, tall, elegant, with a guard's moustache and the slightly strained bonhomie of a man who has slept little. "Delighted, Miss Marple. I've heard of your talents from the Countess. Kraków is honoured." Soup was served, barge clear as ruby, with tiny dumplings floating like white islands. Miss Marple sipped and listened. Conversation was careful. Captain Dabrowski spoke of the estate. The salt mines still yielded, though labour was short since the war. Dr. Liss deplored the rise in nervous disorders among the miners. Irina said almost nothing. Her spoon trembled. Mr. Green attempted lightness. "I understand the catacombs are quite the sight, Miss Marple. Chapels carved entirely from salt. St. Kinga's Chapel with chandeliers of crystal. Pity they're closed just now." "Closed?" Miss Marple's tone was mild. "Because of poor Jan's death?" A flicker passed round the table, like a gust across wheat. "Police orders," the Countess said. "They fear. Souvenir hunters, perhaps. Jan was found in the old royal gallery, very deep. The gate was locked, the key in his pocket, the dagger," her voice caught. "The dagger was his own from the armoury. A family piece, Florentine, 16th century. "Suicide is what they say," Captain Dabrowski cut in, voice harsh. "Jan was always moody. The engagement, well, young people quarrel." Irina's cup rattled in its saucer. Mr. Nowak cleared his throat. "There is the question of the will. Jan had spoken of changes. The mines, the palace, everything would have gone to an orphanage if what, pray?" Miss Marple asked gently. "If he had lived to sign the new document," the lawyer finished. "As it is, the Countess inherits." Coffee was served in a small salon panelled with faded silk. A pianoforte stood open. On its lid lay a volume of Chopin bound in green leather. Miss Marple accepted a thimbleful of Nalewka, cherry brandy fierce enough to bring tears to the eyes, and allowed Captain Dabrowski to show her the armoury, a vaulted chamber smelling of oil and old iron. Swords, morions, wheel-lock pistols lined the walls. An empty space on a velvet rack showed the outline of the missing dagger. "Jan took it himself 3 nights before," the captain said. "Said he wished to copy the crest for a signet. He was an artist, you know, sketched the workings constantly." "Alone in the catacombs at night?" Miss Marple wondered. "With only a lantern?" "The men know every turn. There are chapels, statues, whole cathedrals down there." Jan loved the silence. They returned to the salon. Irina had vanished. Dr. Liss was examining the Countess's pulse. Mr. Green stood at the window smoking. Miss Marple noted the tremor in the Countess's hand as she set down her glass. That evening, after a supper of trout and potato pancakes, the Countess herself conducted Miss Marple to the chapel entrance. A wrought iron gate, black and gilded, guarded a stair spiralling downward. Beyond, the darkness smelled of damp stone and something sharper. Salt. "Tomorrow," the Countess said, "I will take you down. Tonight, sleep. The house is old. It creaks. Do not be alarmed." Chapter 3. Descent. The morning was sharp with frost. The palace windows were filmed with rime, and the dragon in the courtyard wore a cap of ice. At 9:30, Panimata brought hot water and a breakfast tray. Coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in. A soft boiled egg in a knitted cosy, and black bread with a pot of honey the colour of garnets. Miss Marple ate sparingly, dressed in her sturdiest tweed skirt and a cardigan the shade of moss, and descended to the chapel. The Countess awaited her at the iron gate. she had exchanged morning black for a serviceable coat of dark green wool, and carried an electric torch in one gloved hand. A second torch was offered to Miss Marple. "Only we two," the Countess said. "The police have finished. The others are forbidden." Captain Dabrowski protested, but I insisted. The gate swung inward on well-oiled hinges. Stone steps curved down, worn into hollows by centuries of feet. The air grew colder, damper, tasting of iron and ancient dust. Their footsteps echoed. The torches threw circles of yellow light that slid over walls veined with glittering salt. At the foot of the stair, a passage branched left and right. The Countess chose left. "We are beneath the palace now," she explained. "The workings extend under half the old city. The royal galleries are deepest, reserved for the family since the 14th century. They passed side chambers. One held a salt-carved Madonna, her face eroded by damp. Another, a rusted winch and broken buckets. Miss Marple noted everything. The floor was uneven, sometimes treacherous with loose crystals that crunched like sugar. At intervals, iron hooks in the wall held unlit lanterns, provision for longer expeditions. After 10 minutes, the passage widened into a vaulted chamber. Here the salt was pure white, veined faintly pink. A wooden bench, green with age, stood against one wall. On the floor, a chalk outline in the shape of a man. "Here," the Countess whispered. Her torch trembled, throwing shadows that leapt like mourners. Miss Marple knelt, heedless of her skirt. The outline was precise, head toward the bench, feet pointing to a grilled gate set in the far wall. The gate was iron, painted black, with a heavy lock. A dark stain, dried blood, spread within the chalk near the heart. She touched it gently. The salt had absorbed most of the colour, but the shape remained. "The dagger entered here," the Countess said, indicating a spot just below the left breast. "Upward. Dr. List says the angle is consistent with self-infliction by a tall man." Miss Marple rose, joints protesting, and examined the gate. It stood ajar now. The police had left it so. Beyond lay a narrow stair descending into blackness. She shone her torch on the lock. The mechanism was simple, a Yale pattern, but the keyhole showed scratches, recent, bright against the rust. "The key was in Jan's pocket," the Countess continued. "The gate was locked when the miners broke in at dawn. They have a master key for emergencies." Miss Marple's light moved to the floor just inside the gate. Something caught, a scrap of crimson silk, no larger than a sixpence, snagged on a splinter of wood protruding from the jamb. She detached it carefully between thumb and forefinger. The silk was fine, glove weight, torn cleanly as though by a sudden jerk. "Curious," she murmured. The Countess peered. "Irina has gloves of that colour, but she has not been down here since the engagement was announced, perhaps," Miss Marple supplied gently. "Young ladies are impulsive." They moved on. The Countess pointed out features. A salt relief of King Casimir granting the mine charter. A natural cavern where the roof dripped ceaselessly, forming stalactites like frozen tears. Miss Marple listened, but her mind was busy with the gate, the key, the angle of the wound. At noon they emerged, blinking, into the chapel. The Countess's face was pale, her lips bloodless. "You see why I cannot accept suicide," she said. "Jan was sketching that relief, the charter. His easel, his paints, were found untouched. Would a man prepare to die and leave his work half finished?" Miss Marple patted the gloved hand. "My dear, artists are unpredictable, but murderers are creatures of habit. Let us take a little luncheon, and then I should like to see the armoury again." The dining room was empty, save for Pani Marta laying fresh covers. Captain Dabrowski had ridden to the mines. Dr. Liss was with a patient. Irena kept to her room. Mr. Green and Mr. Nowak were closeted in the library over papers. Miss Marple ate sole in a cream sauce and thought about locked gates. Afterwards she sought the armoury alone. The empty velvet rack still gaped. She measured the space with her knitting tape, 14 inches from hilt to point. A long weapon, unwieldy for suicide. She examined the neighbouring daggers. None matched exactly, but a stiletto nearby had a similar crest. Someone, perhaps, had chosen carefully. In the corridor she encountered Mr. Felix Green, emerging from the library, a folder under his arm. He started at sight of her. "Miss Marple, prowling already! The Countess warned us you were a regular bloodhound." "I prefer to think of myself as a knitter who notices dropped stitches," she replied mildly. "You're interested in art, Mr. Green?" "Professionally, yes. The Zborowskis have a Bruegel sketch, said to be hidden in the catacombs. I was negotiating purchase before the tragedy. Hidden?" Miss Marple's eyes were guileless. "How very romantic." Green laughed, but it sounded forced. "Family legend, probably a copy. Still, worth investigation if the catacombs reopen." Chapter 4. Motive and Opportunity. The afternoon was given over to rain, a steady hissing downpour that turned the courtyard flagstones black and set the dragon fountain gurgling like a choked drain. Miss Marple, who disliked idleness, asked permission to explore the upper floors. The Countess, heavy-eyed from a sleepless night, waved a languid hand. "Treat the palace as your own, dear Miss Marple. Only the west wing is shut. Dry rot in the panelling. Pani Marta has the keys." Pani Marta, summoned, proved a reluctant cicerone. She led the way up a secondary stair, narrower than the grand one, its treads worn into scoops. On the first landing, a window looked across sodden roofs to the spires of St. Mary's, veiled in mist. Miss Marple paused to admire the view. Pani Marta shifted her weight, keys clinking. "Many rooms," she said in careful English. "Many memories." They passed a schoolroom with dusty maps still pinned to the walls. Poland before the partitions, the empire of the Jagiellons in faded red. A nursery held a rocking horse whose paint had flaked to reveal the wood beneath, one glass eye missing. In a linen cupboard, Miss Marple noted shelves of sheets monogrammed HZs and, lower down, a pile of crimson gloves, silk-lined kid, identical to the scrap in her pocketbook. She said nothing, but her fingers brushed the top pair. The left thumb showed a tear, freshly mended with black thread. At the end of the corridor, a baize door opened onto the west wing. Pani Marta's face closed like a trap. "No, enter," she said. "Danger!" Miss Marple peered past her. The air beyond was colder, smelling of fungus and wet stone. Floorboards sagged. A strip of wallpaper hung like a torn bandage. Somewhere, water dripped with the regularity of a pulse. "Jan's studio," Pani Marta added reluctantly. "He painted there before Catacombs." Miss Marple filed the information away and allowed herself to be shepherded back downstairs. Tea was served in the small salon. Only Irena appeared, wrapped in a black shawl, her eyes red-rimmed. She accepted a cup with trembling fingers. "You were fond of Jan," Miss Marple observed, pouring milk. Irena's laugh was brittle. "Fond? We were to marry at Christmas. He gave me this." She touched a tiny sapphire on her left hand. Then he began to watch me. Every glance, every smile. He accused me of flirting with Mr. Green at the opera. As if I would. Jealousy is a sad affliction, Miss Marple murmured. Did he quarrel with anyone else? Only the captain, about money. Jan wanted to sell part of the mine to build a hospital for the miners. The captain said it would ruin the estate. Irina's voice dropped. That night, before he died, Jan told me he would change his will. Everything to the orphanage if the Countess opposed him. Miss Marple offered a plate of pianiki, ginger biscuits iced with sugar. Irina took one, crumbled it. Dr. Liss gave him pills for nerves. Jan hated them, said they made him see shadows. At 5 o'clock the men returned. Captain Dabrowski's boots were caked with mine clay. He smelled of damp and tobacco. Mr. Nowak carried a briefcase bulging with documents. Mr. Green was absent. Gone to the post office, the butler said. Dinner was a silent affair. The Countess pleaded a headache and took a tray in her room. Dr. Liss picked at his food, spectacles flashing as he darted glances at the captain. After the sweet apple charlotte with clouds of cream, Miss Marple suggested cards. Only Mr. Nowak accepted. The others drifted away. They played bezique in the library, a room lined with books in Polish, Latin and French. A coal fire hissed in the grate. Mr. Nowak shuffled with the dexterity of a man who had spent his life handling papers. You knew Jan well? Miss Marple asked, cutting for deal. Since he was in short coats? A difficult boy, idealist. The new will would have been disastrous. The mines are the family's lifeblood. Yet the Countess inherits now. Nowak's eyes flicked up. Yes, fortunate perhaps. Though she will never touch the capital, only the income. The estate is entailed. Miss Marple played a queen of spades. And Captain Dabrowski, he manages everything. A loyal servant, decorated in 20 against the Bolsheviks. Without him the mines would have closed years ago. They played 3 rubbers. Miss Marple lost gracefully, pleading fatigue. In her room she added to her notebook, crimson gloves in linen press, left thumb mended, West Wing studio, Jan's before Catacombs, quarrel re-hospital sale, new will disinherits Countess, Captain sole manager, motive if marriage expected. Dr. Liss prescribed sedatives. She underlined the last 2 lines, then opened her window. Rain had ceased. The air smelled of wet leaves and wood smoke. Somewhere below, a door closed softly. Footsteps crossed the courtyard. Measured, military. Captain Dabrowski, no doubt returning from a late errand. Miss Marple watched his tall figure pass beneath the lantern, then drew the curtains. Before bed she examined the scrap of silk again. The tear was L-shaped, as though caught on a nail or splinter. She placed it in an envelope marked Exhibit A and slipped it between the pages of her prayer book. Sleep came slowly. She dreamed of salt corridors glittering like frost, of a young man sketching by lantern light, of a gate clanging shut behind him. In the dream a hand, scarred strong, turned a key that was not the one in Jan's pocket. She woke once, near dawn, to the sound of muffled sobbing. It seemed to come from the west wing, but when she sat up, the house was silent again, holding its secrets close. Chapter 5. The Second Death. The 5th night in the palace was windless and bitter. Frost etched ferns across the window panes, and the courtyard dragon wore a beard of ice. Miss Marple had retired early, pleading the traveller's need for rest, but sleep eluded her. She sat in her dressing gown by a dying fire, her notebook open on the table beside a cooling cup of cocoa. The entries now filled 3 pages in her small, precise hand. At 11:30, the house settled into that particular hush that precedes catastrophe. Somewhere a clock struck the quarter. The sound floated up the stairwell like a warning. Miss Marple closed the book, slipped it into the pocket of her gown, and opened her door a careful inch. The corridor was dark save for a thin blade of light beneath the Countess's door at the far end. No footsteps, no murmur of voices, only the faint rhythmic drip from the dragon fountain below. She was on the point of returning to bed when a scream shattered the silence. High roar cut off almost before it began. It came from the chapel direction. Miss Marple snatched her torch, thrust her feet into felt slippers, and hurried along the passage. Doors opened as she passed. Mr. Nowak in a purple dressing gown, Dr. Leese clutching a black bag, Captain Dabrowski already pulling on boots over pyjamas. Irina appeared at the head of the servants' stair, white as paper, a candle trembling at her hand. The chapel was unlit, the iron gate to the catacombs standing ajar. A single lantern burned on the floor of the vestibule, throwing a pool of yellow on the stones. At the foot of the spiral stair lay Mr. Felix Green. He was on his back, one leg doubled beneath him, the other stretched toward the gate. His skull had struck the edge of a step. Blood, thick and dark, had spread into a halo. In his right hand, he still clutched the Renaissance dagger, the same that had killed Jeanne, its point toward his own breast, as though he had carried it downward and fallen upon it. The gate beyond him was locked. The key lay on the flagstones beside his outstretched fingers. Captain Dabrowski knelt, felt for a pulse, and shook his head. Dead. Instantaneous, I should say. Dr. Liss pushed forward, opened his bag, and made a brief examination. Basilar fracture. The dagger wound is superficial, post-mortem, I fancy. He must have slipped, struck his head, and the blade pierced him as he fell. Again the locked gate, Mr. Nowak muttered, and the key inside. Miss Marple's torch moved slowly over the scene. Green's shoes were polished, no mud. His left hand still held a folded sheet of paper, creased as though clutched in spasm. She noted a smear of blood on the third step. Fresh, arterial. The lantern had not been there earlier. Its glass was cool. Footsteps clattered behind them. Inspector Kowalski arrived with 2 constables, coat buttoned awry, moustache bristling. He took in the tableau with a single sweep of tired eyes. Another accident, in the same place? His voice was flat with disbelief. Captain, you will account for everyone's movements. Dabrowski straightened. I was playing cards with Mr. Nowak in the library until 2 o'clock. Dr. Liss joined us at 1 for a nightcap. Miss Wojcik retired at 10. The Countess took a sleeping draught at 11. Pani Marta saw her to bed. Mr. Green said he had letters to write and went to his room. Kowalski grunted. And the dagger, returned by my office only this afternoon. Locked in the armory safe, Dabrowski said. I have the only key, here. He produced a small chub from his pocket. The inspector examined. The gate. The lock showed no fresh scratches. The key turned smoothly when he tried it. He pocketed both key and dagger, posted a constable at the chapel door, and ordered the body removed to the mortuary. Miss Marple lingered until the others had gone. She shone her torch on the steps once more. A faint scuff mark, hardly visible, marred the dust near the top. And on the iron railing, at shoulder height for a tall man, a single strand of fair hair caught the light. Green's hair was dark. Captain Dabrowski's was cropped iron grey. She plucked the strand free, wrapped it in tissue, and tucked it beside the crimson silk. Upstairs, the household gathered in the long gallery, a cavernous room lit by a single chandelier. The Countess, in a velvet wrapper, sat rigid on a gilt settee. Irina wept silently into a handkerchief. Dr. Liss measured drops into a glass. The air smelled of valerian. Miss Marple accepted a chair near the fire. "Inspector Kowalski will wish to search Mr. Green's room," she said mildly. "Might I accompany him? An old woman's curiosity, you understand." The inspector, when approached, raised no objection. Green's room was on the second floor, overlooking the street. It was a bachelor's chaos. Suits hung anyhow. A half-packed suitcase open on the bed, papers strewn across a desk. A portable typewriter held a sheet headed Confidential Report, Bruegel Sketch. Miss Marple's eye fell on the blotter. A letter lay half-written in Green's impatient scrawl. "The Bruegel is a forgery, clever but detectable under infrared. The real value lies in the salt mine concession signed by King Casimir in 1368, hidden behind the—" The sentence ended in a blot, as though the pen had been hurled down. Beside it lay a torn envelope addressed in a spidery hand, "F. Green, Esquire, to be opened only in event of my death." The inspector slit it with his penknife. Inside was a single sheet. "If anything happens to me, look to the captain. He knows about the concession." J.Z. Kowalski's eyebrows rose. "Jan Zaborowski's writing, dated 3 days before his death." Miss Marple examined the blotter under her magnifying glass. Beneath the fresh blot, faint indentations from a previous sheet. "Meet me, midnight, Royal Gallery, urgent." The impression was deep, as though written in haste with a hard nib. She opened the wardrobe. On the floor lay a pair of patent leather shoes, the soles unscuffed. In the pocket of a dinner jacket, she found a second key, smaller, brighter than the gate key, attached to a length of black ribbon. "Armory safe," she murmured. Kowalski pocketed it. "We shall see." Back in the gallery, the inspector addressed the silent company. "No one is to leave the palace until my inquiries are complete. The catacombs remain sealed. Dr. Liss, you will examine the body at once. Captain, your safe will be opened in my presence at 9 sharp." The captain inclined his head, face impassive. Only the scar showed white against his tan. Miss Marple retired at last, but not to sleep. She sat by her window, watching the constable pace beneath the lantern. At 3 o'clock, a figure crossed the courtyard, panimata, shawl over her nightgown, carrying a covered tray toward the west wing. She disappeared through the baize door. 10 minutes later, she returned empty-handed. Chapter 6. The patterned snow began to fall at dawn, soft and relentless, powdering the palace roofs and muffling the city's bells. By 8 o'clock the courtyard lay under a white quilt. The dragon fountain had frozen mid-spurt, its bronze jaws rimmed with icicles. Inspector Kowalski arrived with 2 sergeants and a photographer, his boots leaving dark wounds in the virgin surface. The household assembled in the long gallery, breakfast untouched on a sideboard. Even the coffee had grown cold. Miss Marple entered last, small and grey in her travelling coat, a neat leather notebook clasped against her cardigan. She accepted a chair near the windows and opened the book with the air of a clergyman consulting his sermon. The inspector stood before the marble fireplace, hands behind his back. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "2 men are dead within a week. both in the catacombs, both behind a locked gate with the key inside. The first death the coroner called suicide, the second accident. I am not satisfied. Miss Marple has asked permission to speak. I grant it. He sat. Every eye turned to the old lady. Miss Marple's voice was gentle, almost apologetic, yet it carried to the furthest corner. Thank you, Inspector. I have no wish to distress anyone, but murder is a distressing business. Let us examine the pattern. First, Jan Zborowski. He descends alone to sketch, carrying a valuable dagger taken from the armory 3 days earlier. He is found stabbed, the gate locked, the key in his pocket. Suicide, we are told. Yet the easel stands untouched, the paints unmixed. Would a man intent on death prepare his palette first? Second, Mr. Felix Green. He is discovered at the foot of the same stair, skull fractured, the dagger in his hand, the gate again locked from within, the key beside him. Accident, Dr. Liss suggests. He slipped, fell upon the blade. Yet his shoes are clean, the steps dry, the lantern cool. And why carry the dagger downward at midnight? Two impossible crimes, but impossibility is merely a matter of perspective. She turned a page. Now consider the gates, both times locked from the inside, keys within reach of the victims. Yet gates have two sides. A duplicate key enters with the murderer, the crime is committed, the gate is locked from the outside, and the true key is posted back through the bars to lie beside the body. A simple conjurer's trick, if one possesses duplicates. Captain Dabrowski stirred. The only duplicates are on Panimata's bunch, and in my safe. Precisely, Miss Marple said. And your safe, Captain, was opened this morning. 2 keys were missing. One to the catacomb gate, one to the West Wing studio. The ribbon key found in Mr. Green's pocket fits your safe. Someone borrowed it, struck impressions in wax, returned it before you noticed. Mr. Nohack dabbed his forehead with a silk handkerchief. But motive? Jan was heir. His death benefits the Countess. Miss Marple inclined her head. Jan intended a new will, disinheriting his aunt in favour of an orphanage. The document was drafted, only signature lacked. The Countess would have lost everything, but there is more. She opened a handbag, drew out the envelope marked Exhibit A, and laid the crimson silk on the table. This was torn from a glove, caught on the gate splinter the morning after Jan's death. The matching pair, left thumb mended, is in the linen press. But the gloves belong to Miss Wojcik, and she has not entered the catacombs since her engagement. Someone borrowed them to suggest her presence, then returned them. Irina gave a choked cry. I never... No, my dear. You are meant to be suspected. Jealousy is a useful smokescreen. Miss Marple produced the strand of hair in tissue. This was on the stair railing at shoulder height for a tall man. Mr. Green was dark. This is fair, turning grey at the temples. Captain Dabrowski, you are the only fair-haired man in the house tall enough. The captain's scar livid. He half rose. This is outrageous. Sit down, please, Inspector Kowalski said quietly. 2 constables moved forward. Miss Marple continued, inexorable. Jan discovered the Casimir concession, priceless, hidden behind the charter relief. Mr. Green, examining the Bruegel forgery, found Jan's note implicating you, Captain. He attempted blackmail. You arranged a midnight meeting in the Royal Gallery, using the duplicate key. You killed Jan, locked the gate, posted the key through. The crimson glove was a flourish, to implicate Irina and explain Jan's jealousy. Mr. Green became dangerous. You lured him down last night with a forged note. Meet me midnight, urgent. The impression remains on his blotter. You waited at the stairhead, struck him with the bronze candlestick from the chapel vestibule. Returned now to its place. He fell. You descended, planted the dagger, locked the gate from outside, posted the key. The superficial wound convinced Dr. Liss it was accident. Dr. Liss removed his spectacles, polished them slowly. The angle of the skull fracture, yes, it could be from above. Miss Marple closed her notebook. Captain, you needed the concession to secure the estate, and the Countess's hand. Pani Marta saw you return at dawn after the first murder, boots clay-stained. Last night you played cards until 2, then slipped out by the west wing door. She carried you coffee at 3, believing you distraught. Loyalty silenced her until now. Pani Marta, summoned, stood in the doorway twisting her apron. At Kowalski's nod, she spoke in halting Polish, translated by the sergeant. The captain asked for coffee in the studio. He was writing letters, he said. His hands shook. Captain Dabrowski surged to his feet. Lies! Kowalski's hand clamped his shoulder. Tadeusz Dabrowski, I arrest you for the murders of Jan Zborowski and Felix Green. The captain's hand flashed to his pocket. A constable pinioned his arms. The fight was brief. Handcuffs clicked. The scar stood out like a brand. The Countess rose, white to the lips. Tadeusz, why? He looked at her with sudden anguish. For you, Helena. The mine's failing, debts mounting. With Jan gone, the concession ours. Marriage, security. I loved you since 20. Her eyes filled. You murdered my nephew for money? He turned away. The constables led him out. Snow swirled through the open door, melting on the parquet in small dark tears. Miss Marple gathered her gloves. Human nature, Countess. The same in Kraków as in Broadgate. Greed wears many uniforms. Inspector Kowalski approached, hat in hand. My apologies, Pani, and my thanks, Madame. He bowed to Miss Marple. Poland owes you a debt. She smiled. A cup of tea will suffice, and perhaps a sleigh to the station tomorrow. Chapter 7. The light above. 2 days later the snow had ceased, leaving Kraków muffled under a white pall. The palace windows were shuttered in respect for the dead, and black crepe hung from the Kanonitsa Street door. Miss Marple's trunk stood packed in the hall, her brown tweed coat and fur-lined boots laid ready by Pani Marta, whose eyes were red but whose hands were steady. The Countess entered the small salon where Miss Marple waited, a velvet box in her gloved hands. She had aged 10 years in 48 hours. The silver hair was drawn back severely, the sable coat exchanged for widow's black. My dear, she said, voice husky, the police have taken Tadeusz. He has confessed everything, the duplicates, the concession, even the forged note to Green. The concession is safe. The orphanage will have its hospital after all. Jan's last wish. Miss Marple inclined her head. A bitter victory, but victory nonetheless. The Countess opened the box. On white satin lay an emerald brooch, square cut, set in filigree gold, shaped like a tiny salt crystal. For you, she said, from the family vault. It is little enough. Miss Marple's fingers brushed the stone. Beautiful, but I have my memories, and my knitting. Still, I shall wear it on Sundays. A sleigh waited at the porte cochere, its bells muffled in black ribbon. The Countess accompanied her guest to the step. You will write? She asked. When I reach Broadgate. And you must visit England when the lilacs bloom. Danemead House is quiet, but the garden is kind to old bones. They embraced. The Countess's cheek was cold against Miss Marple's. The sleigh moved off, runners hissing over packed snow. Kraków unrolled like a picture book. The Rynek with its flower stalls shuttered, the Wawel castle looming pale against the sky, the Vistula frozen at the edges. At the station, the Orient Simplon Express waited, steam pluming into the crisp air. A porter stowed the trunk. Miss Marple climbed aboard, settling into her corner seat with a small sigh of contentment. The train pulled out. She opened her handbag, drew out the matinee jacket, now complete, pale blue with pearl buttons, and laid it across her knee. From the velvet box she took the emerald, pinned it at her throat, and regarded her reflection in the window. The stone caught the winter light and threw back a green spark, bright as hope. Human nature, she reflected, was the same beneath salt mines or English hedgerows. Greed, jealousy, love twisted into ugly shapes, yet truth, like salt, preserved. She took up her needles, began a new row, counting stitches with the calm precision of long practice. Outside, Poland slipped away. Snow-laden pines, villages huddled under thatch, church spires pricking the sky. Inside, the carriage was warm, the rhythm of the wheels soothing. Miss Marple knitted on, mile after mile, until the light faded and the conductor came to lower the blinds. At Vienna she changed trains, at Ostend she boarded the boat, at Victoria she was met by Raymond's anxious face and Joan's welcoming smile. Danemead House smelled of log fires and roast beef. Gladys carried up hot water. The matinee jacket was exclaimed over and folded away for the coming infant. That night, in her own bed with the familiar chintz curtains drawn, Miss Marple opened her notebook for the last time. She added a final entry in her neat slanting hand. Case closed. Emerald received. Return to Countess when convenient. Pattern. Greed masked as loyalty. Reminder. Check Broadgate Post Office for missing parcel. She closed the book, placed it on the bedside table beside her prayer book and spectacles, and turned out the light. Outside, an English moon silvered the chrysanthemums. All was quiet. In Kraków, far beneath the palace, the catacombs glittered on, chapel and gallery and royal vault, waiting for the next footstep. But the gate was sealed, the dragon fountain ran clear, and the salt kept its ancient secret safe.